Hello, and welcome to Tim's Reflections from Ohio, a YouTube video series where we talk about and reflect on parables that Jesus told, stories he told, as well as general stories from his life. And today our reflection will be part two of a reflection from a few weeks ago where we talked about God's answers to our prayers. And today our reading will come from the book of Matthew, and I'll be reading from chapter 7 and verses 7 through 12. And these are Jesus' words. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be opened. Or what man is there among you who if his son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will he give him a serpent? If you then, being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father, who is in heaven, give good things to those who ask him? Therefore, whatever you want men to do to you, do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets. Now, I normally read from the New King James Version, but I wanted to read this passage also from the Amplified Bible. And it says, keep on asking and it will be given you. Keep on seeking and you will find. Keep on knocking reverently and the door will be open to you. For everyone who keeps on asking receives, and he who keeps on seeking finds. And to him who keeps on knocking, it will be opened. Or what man is there of you, if his son asks him for a loaf of bread, will hand him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will hand him a serpent? If you then, evil as you are, know how to give good and advantageous gifts to your children, how much more will your Father, who is in heaven, perfect as he is, give good and advantageous things to those who keep on asking him? So then, whatever you desire that others should do to you, even so do also to and for them, for this is, it sums up the law and the prophets. As I read this week, I was thinking about sometimes why we don't receive answers to our prayers. And I think there's probably two reasons, maybe more, but two come to mind real quick. One of those is we don't persist. And Jesus himself talked about being persistent, asking, keep on asking. The other thing is we don't have pure motives. We want what we want. We need a car. We ask for a certain make and model of a car. God, I need a car. And, when we just need dependable transportation, we're asking for a Corvette or a Camaro or a 4x4 or an SUV. We're asking for those kind of things, and maybe we don't need them. We need to, the other thing, I guess there is a third reason that comes to mind, and that is sometimes our prayers are not answered because we haven't asked according to God's will. God knows we need a car, but we ask for something that we don't need, we just want it. Today, I want to share with you a story, another miraculous story of answered prayer. In that earlier video on answered prayer, I shared a story from a book by Joe Wheeler. And today, I want to share another story from, I think it's a different book by Joe Wheeler. Cover looks very similar, but it's called My Favorite Prayer Stories. And this story is called Ask in Faith, Nothing Wavering, and it's by someone named Adelma Gladys Bates. This book originally was published in a Christian magazine for youth back in 1947. So this is an older story, but it illustrates the point of how God answers prayer in miraculous ways so well. I don't know if we could find many more like they're this miraculous. I'm sure we could, but this is one that really jumped out at me when I read it. It says this: Welcome was the simple message read by friend or stranger when he climbed the stone steps that led to the trim cottage in Evans Lane. Everyone who knew those who lived within was aware that it wasn't just an empty word used to grace the doormat. For many, a tired, hungry wayfarer had found hospitality at this friendly home awaiting them. It was the bright smile of Myra Davis that most adorned the place, but mere adornment was not its intent, for she found real joy in sharing her happiness with others. Perhaps the constant care her mother required in her illness had intensified her willingness to brighten life's drabness in ways that only Myra could. She it was who washed and starched the fluffy yellow curtains at the kitchen windows and baked the flaky apple pies that filled the house with their aroma, which drifted down the lane each Friday morning. She too had trimmed the shrubbery that lined the walk and trained the scarlet rambler to bend its beauty over the porch near Mother's window. Poor Mother, Myra thought, and she sighed as she bent to cut the grass, choking the pansies. Her mother's heart condition had been critically worse of late, but she was extremely patient when her bad spells came. If only she didn't suffer so. Myra prayed constantly that the Lord would spare Mother pain and not take her suddenly when Myra wasn't near to bring the relief that Dr. Thomas had provided. With good care, Mother would live for years, he had told them. It was only these sudden attacks that were dangerous. She glanced through the open window to where Mother lay, her ashen face turned toward the light, her lips moving. Myra. She was whispering, "Hurry." Dropping the grass shears, Myra ran quickly up the steps, through the kitchen, and into the adjoining room. Despite the fact that her mother's calls had been frequent of late, she felt alarmed as she saw how unusually pale she looked now. Without hesitation, Myra began the usual routine to which she had become accustomed. She wheeled the oxygen tank from the closet to the bedside, and she carefully adjusted the valve after hurriedly placing the tent over the pale, gasping patient. In a few moments, she sighed in relief, for her mother's white face had flushed slightly and she was breathing normally. Within an hour, Mother had fallen asleep. The tent was removed and the tank returned to the closet. It was sundown. Myra sat by the open window watching this twilight steal across the valley, listening to the woodland concert in the nearby grove of evergreens. A nightingale's lusty notes all but drowned out the call of a whippoorwill and a brown thrush. From the distance, a great horned owl called gloomingly. When the moon rose behind the hill, she was still sitting there watching its silvery beams until they found the brook below the house. Myra's revelry was broken by a sudden choking sound. Turning, she switched on a light. Her mother's breathing was difficult again. Quickly, Myra prepared to administer the oxygen again. Turning the handle, she waited for the familiar sound. The silence was ominous. There was no more oxygen. Myra was terrified. What could she do? The tank had scarcely been used since it had been delivered. Surely it couldn't have been emptied already. She tried again. Could it be possible that by mistake the hospital had sent out a tank that was almost empty? The sufferer's eyes sought hers. "Just a minute, Mother," Myra said quietly. Then she turned and fled from the bedside. "Oh, Heavenly Father," Myra prayed from the corner of her room, "please help me to know what to do. Send help, Lord, for I cannot leave Mother while she is this way." Myra could not but marvel at the calm that came over to her while she prayed. Quickly she returned to the gasping woman. Even if she were to call the doctor or the hospital, that she feared help would arrive too late. "Mother," she began, scarcely knowing just what she would say and surprising herself when she finished the sentence. "You must try to manage without the oxygen for a few minutes. Try to breathe as normally as you can for a while to see if you can strengthen your respiratory system. Will you try?" Her mother's eyes closed and she attempted to nod a reply. At that moment there was a knock on the door. When Myra opened it, she found their nearest neighbor, Mrs. Parker, standing there. She was attempting to apologize for her late call when the girl all but swept her off her feet in welcome. "Oh, Mrs. Parker, I'm so glad you came. I've been praying that someone would. Surely you are the answer to that prayer." And she dabbed at the corner of her eye with the hem of her apron while she told the older woman what had happened. Mrs. Parker suggested she call the police emergency squad at once because the hospital ambulance was usually out on call. The telephone operator supplied the number and the police promised to send immediate aid. Myra returned to her mother's room and knelt by the bed. The gasps were coming more quickly now. The suffering eyes looked imploringly into her own. Now the woman choked, looking at the gauge. Calmly, Myra placed the tent in its proper position and turned on the valve. There was no sound. "Father, all things are in thy hands," she prayed silently as she bowed by her mother's side. Suddenly a radiant glow seemed to fill the room. Was there a heavenly hand upon her shoulder? A voice whispered, "When thou passest through the waters, I will be with thee, and through the rivers, they shall not overflow thee." The girl was trembling. Surely she was in the very presence of a divine being. She had done all that she could, and now heaven had sent aid that no human being could give. All fear vanished, and she raised her head in grateful adoration. The light was gone, but her mother lay, resting quietly. The oxygen was flowing freely into the tent. It was nearly half an hour later when the new supply of oxygen was brought from the local hospital and replaced the empty tank that had so miraculously provided life for Mrs. Davis. Myra stood at the window watching Mrs. Parker disappear down the moonlit lane until she was lost in the shadows of the night. "Surely," she said, "God does work in mysterious ways, his wonders to perform." As I read this story, and I thought about how God used an empty oxygen tank to save the life of this woman, it was just a reminder for me that God is still, we read in the Bible, we read about all the prayers that he answered and the miracles that were worked in Bible times. We need to be reminded with stories like this. It's an older story, but we need to be reminded that he's still working miracles today. He is still answering prayers today. And when we get discouraged and we think, "I have prayed over and over and over again about this and nothing's happening. I need a job. I've prayed for a job. I've looked for a job and I'm not finding a job." We need to keep persisting. We need to keep praying and asking God, "God, you know I need a job. Lead me to the right job." Then we need to be out there knocking on doors. We need to be sending or applying online. However we do it, we need to be out there or looking for work actively. God knows where the right place is. If we are a young single person and we're looking for a spouse, we need to pray that God will lead us to the right person, the right marriage partner. We need to pray that if we're married and we want to have a child, we need to pray that God will send us a healthy child at the right time. God knows what is best for us. He knows the right time. He knows everything about us. He has watched us from the time we were born to where we are today. So for some of us, that's a long time. But he has been watching us through each stage of our life. He knows what's best for us, and we need to trust him. Sometimes we think we know what's best, and that's where we get into trouble. We think we know what's best. We need to remember, God, we don't know what's best always. Sometimes we're way off base, but God knows what's best for us, and he will provide for us. He will take care of us at the right time. If you've ever read any of the stories from George Mueller was a man who lived in I want to say Britain, one of the United Kingdom countries, but he lived there back in the 1800s, a long time ago. And he opened some orphanages. He had a heart for orphans. He opened orphanages, but he never asked anyone for money, any human. He never made his needs known to any human. He only made those needs known to God. And God provided food. God provided money. God provided for the needs of all of those orphans that he took care of. There were times where the children sat down at the mealtime and there was no food. And he had been praying, and just at the last minute came a knock on the door, and someone came bringing food. God took care of him, and because of his faithfulness and his trust in God, and God will take care of us. He will take care of you. He will take care of me. He will provide for our needs if we will only trust him and keep persisting, keep coming to him, keep saying, God, I'm here again. I need help. There may be times where we're in pain, our physical bodies are aging and things start happening and the pain gets intense. We come to God and we say, God, I'm in pain again. Help me. Take care of me. If I told this story on a video before, please forgive me, but there was a time in 2007 where I was struggling. I was having the most excruciating headaches. If you could think of the worst headache you've ever had and multiply it by about 10, it gives you an idea what I was dealing with. It was horrible. And the doctor had given me some medication to take, and I had ran out of medication. I was laying on the bed in excruciating pain. And my wife had gone to the pharmacy to get the medicine refilled. And I remember laying there on the bed, and I remember praying, and I told God, I said, God, if you want me to have a headache, it's okay, but I can't handle this one. And I fell asleep. And when I woke up, the headache, it didn't go away. It was still there, but it had gone on that scale of 1 to 10. It had gone from a 10 down to about a 3, something that I could live with. And I remember waking up and the headache had calmed all that down from, like I said, from a 10 maybe to a 3. And I remember being in awe because I knew I could remember how excruciating that pain was. And God answered that prayer for me. And God will answer prayers for you, and he will continue to answer prayers for any of us as long as we're praying for his will to be done, and we're praying for actual needs. Don't get discouraged. Don't give up praying. Don't turn away from God and say he doesn't care, he doesn't listen. Understand that he knows what's best, and he will provide for us. He will take care of us at the right time. It's just up to us to trust him. That's it for the reflection today, and I encourage you, don't give up. Keep praying. Keep praying every day, every moment of every day. Pray as much and as long as it takes. Thank you for viewing the video today. If you've been blessed by the reflection, please hit that thumbs up button. If you've not subscribed to the channel, please do so. That way you'll receive notification of new videos in the future. Have a blessed day. Have a blessed week. And remember that God loves you. He loved you so much that he sent his son to die on that cross for you. He loves you.